I'm 28, and my stepmother is 49. She considers herself a master of event planning. Ever since she married my father, she took over organizing every family gathering and celebration. As a kid, I hated these events because she controlled everything and got upset if anyone complained, but I endured it for my father's sake. According to him, it helped her feel like part of the family. I'm getting married to my fiancée, Jane, who's 26, in July. We got engaged in early 2021, but a few months later, Jane got pregnant, so we postponed the wedding to focus on our son. That meant our engagement dragged on longer than expected. From the very start, my stepmother tried to take over planning the wedding, complaining, contacting our planner behind our backs, randomly showing up at Jane's dress fittings. We repeatedly asked her to stop, but she wouldn't. My father insisted we tolerate her, but it was obvious she resented not being in charge and was especially mad that she wasn't listed as mother of the groom on the invitations. Besides our son, we also have Luke, Jane's 4-year-old half-brother from her father's side. She got custody of him a few months into our relationship after his parents passed away. During the pandemic, I moved in with him and have been involved in Luke's life ever since. He doesn't call me dad, but Jane and I love him as if he were our own. My stepmother, however, hates Luke. She accuses Jane of using kids to insert herself into the family. After our son was born, these accusations only got worse. My father adores Jane and the kids, but my stepmother constantly tells him not to babysit Luke, which is why we rarely leave our children with them. Usually, Jane's brother and his wife watch them since their kids are around the same age. Last Sunday, we had an emergency. Jane's brother was out of town, and the rest of her siblings live in different cities, as do my mom and sister. My father agreed to watch the kids at our house, so we left. When we returned, we found both children crying, my stepmother screaming, and my father helplessly trying to calm everyone down. Apparently, Luke had mentioned that he and our son would be the ring bearers at our wedding, and my stepmother lost it. She yelled that she wouldn't allow it because Luke isn't family. Then she did something horrible. When Luke started crying, she hit him. His lip is still busted. She had never crossed that line before. We immediately banned her from our house and wedding. My father was furious and said he wouldn't attend without her. He then convinced half of his family to boycott the wedding, downplaying what she had done. My stepbrother also refuses to come. He fully supports his mother, no matter how much I try to tell him the truth. Jane and I are standing firm, but now a lot of my cousins, who had planned to attend, are begging us to reconsider. Jane's family is on our side, and one of her aunts even suggested that my stepmother acts this way because she feels excluded. Honestly, I'm sick of my family making excuses for her. I love my father and really want him at my wedding, but if cutting him off completely is necessary to protect my family, then so be it. We also filed a police report the next day. We took Luke to the pediatrician and gathered as much evidence as possible, photos of his injuries, and by sheer luck, security camera footage. Some people guessed right. My stepmother wasn't invited to our house, but my father refuses to go anywhere without her. We took precautions but never imagined she'd go this far. The actual assault wasn't on camera, but the footage captured her screaming and Luke crying before and after. Now she has an official record of child abuse, and we will make sure she faces the consequences. First update. My stepmother got what she wanted. She's banned from our wedding. Jane and I have completely cut contact with my father and stepmother. We haven't spoken to them since the incident, and we won't be the ones to reach out. Any communication goes through my younger sister, who is fully on our side but keeps limited contact with them. I've decided to follow Jane's approach when dealing with people who matter. She forgives if they apologize but never forgets. If my father and stepmother ever genuinely realize what they did wrong and apologize, we might forgive them, but we will never let them forget what they did to our family. For now, neither of them will be allowed near Luke, our son, or any future children we might have. Even if we forgive them, that won't change. As for the rest of the family, I saw many people suggesting I post Luke's pictures and the security footage online. I'm not very active on social media, but even if I were, I don't feel comfortable sharing something like that publicly. Especially considering that nothing on the internet ever truly disappears, I also decided not to show the photos to my family unless absolutely necessary. It's worth mentioning that while my family adores my father, most of them were never particularly fond of my stepmother. She had 2 failed marriages before meeting my dad, the first of which resulted in my stepbrother being born, and my dad actually cheated on his then-girlfriend to be with her. My family loved that woman and instantly disliked my stepmother. From the start, she was controlling, manipulative, and desperate to position herself as the head of the family. Her favorite way to do that was by organizing every single family event because it guaranteed her attention and praise. That's why I hated those gatherings as a kid. She always found a way to make everything about herself. It didn't matter if it was Christmas or my sister's birthday. She always made sure she was front and center. The rest of the family tolerated it, but never actually liked her. With Luke, things were different. Most of my relatives didn't meet him until after the pandemic restrictions eased, by which time he was already 2 years old. He's a smart, genuinely charming kid, and since there hadn't been any small children in the family for a while, everyone immediately adored him. I suspect that bothered my stepmother. Jane and Luke were accepted by my family far more easily than she ever was, and maybe that's why she resents them. But I can't say for sure. My stepmother was also upset that she wasn't just excluded from planning the wedding. She wasn't involved in it at all. She pressured us to let her be the host, even though we had already asked one of Jane's best friends a year ago. My stepbrother was my best man, and she even tried to suggest her niece be the flower girl. We had already promised that role to Jane's 3-year-old niece, and besides, her niece is 15 and doesn't even know us. She also tried convincing us to let my father walk Jane down the aisle since her father is no longer alive, but her older brother had already taken on that role. The same brother I mentioned earlier. She was disappointed that my family wasn't as involved in the wedding as Jane's, constantly complaining that this wouldn't have happened if I were in charge. But no matter how petty she is, it doesn't justify what she did to a child. Since I'm not speaking to my father, my sister keeps me updated. From what she told me, my father and stepmother's version of events completely ignores what happened to Luke. They claim we banned them simply because we can't stand my stepmother. Given that most of our relatives already disliked her, it wasn't hard to explain what actually happened that night. The family members I genuinely wanted at the wedding apologized and are now calling out my father for enabling her. As for those who haven't reached out, or the ones who think we overreacted, we've made it clear they're no longer welcome in our home. Unsurprisingly, most of them are from my father's generation. But realizing that they're so biased they'd rather defend a woman they despise after she hurt a child, just to stay on my father's good side, only confirmed for me that I don't need any of them in my life. My stepbrother is still in complete denial. He refuses to believe his mother could ever harm a child, even with all the evidence we have. And honestly, I get it. I love my mother too, but that doesn't mean I'm going to excuse his blindness. It's painful because we used to be close as kids, but I have no regrets about cutting ties. Besides, Jane has 3 other siblings, her older brother, her twin brother, and her younger sister, and my relationship with them is already stronger than the one I ever had with my stepbrother. As for Jane's family, they're furious over what happened and have been incredibly supportive. Her mother's side of the family immediately embraced Luke as one of their own after Jane got custody, and they check in regularly to see how he's doing. In the end, we actually saved money because we cut several guests from the wedding invitations. Instead, we decided to use that money to help Jane's cousin. She lives in another country and originally couldn't afford to attend, so we're covering her plane ticket. Luke is feeling much better and is back to being the happy, energetic kid he's always been. The cut on his lip wasn't too deep. It's healing slowly, but thankfully, he didn't need stitches. A few days ago, we sat down with Luke and explained that my father and stepmother would no longer be part of our lives. He always liked my father, but he understands that he comes as a package deal with my stepmother. Luke is clearly afraid of her, but we're doing everything possible to make him feel safe. Jane and I reassured him that he is part of our family, that we love him, and that nothing will ever change that. I'm not too worried about my father or stepmother showing up at the wedding, but we still informed the venue organizers and provided them with photos, just in case they try anything. Better to be safe than regret it later. Some people pointed out the hypocrisy of my stepmother calling Luke not family. I completely agree. Her go-to excuse for almost everything has always been that she doesn't feel accepted in our family. For years, my father forced me to participate in everything she organized, constantly reminding me of her insecurities. The fact that he's still defending her, not realizing the sheer hypocrisy of it, especially when Luke is actually part of our family, made me understand something. No matter how much I love my father, being around him is no longer safe for my family. It hurts to know my son won't have his one remaining biological grandfather in his life. But he has two amazing step-grandfathers who more than make up for it. Right now, I feel sad, but I'm also at peace with how things turned out. I don't like complaining about my life. It's chaotic, but it's beautiful. I love my fiancé, I love my kids, and I'm lucky to love my job. We are happy, and I won't let anyone take that away from us. I hope this is my last update on the situation, but if anything changes, I'll be sure to share. Second update, my family and my kids. I'll start with something that might disappoint some people. We're slowly coming to terms with the fact that my stepmother will probably get off with just a slap on the wrist. Jane and I are discussing our next steps with a lawyer, but we're not sure how things will unfold. It's still too early to make any decisions, so we're trying not to rush anything. That said, I'm happy to report that we've started the process of getting a restraining order against my stepmother. We're using the same evidence we gathered in the week following the incident, including security footage and photos of Luke, and for now, we're focusing on that. I still haven't spoken to my father. My sister continues to have limited contact with him, but is seriously considering cutting ties completely, as she's the only one in our circle still talking to him. He constantly asks her about me, wanting to know if I've calmed down yet. According to her, he's frustrated that half the family refuses to talk to him, but he still doesn't seem to understand why. I told my sister she doesn't have to be our messenger. I never asked her to act as a middleman, and I can tell this is weighing on her. But she insists she'll cut him off only when she's ready. By the way, I have zero doubt that my stepmother attacked Luke. Luke told us the moment we got home, and my father confirmed it in his pathetic attempt to justify her actions. He never tried to cover it up. The only credit I can give him is that he at least put an ice pack on Luke's lip. Meanwhile, my stepmother was too busy yelling about how Luke was just being a crybaby to even deny what she had done. Many people correctly guessed that my stepmother is younger than my father. She's 5 years younger than his previous girlfriend, the one he cheated on to be with her. They started dating when I was about 15. Fun fact, my stepbrother is only a month older than me. My stepmother is turning 50 this year. She had him at 21 and married his father a year later. Both of our kids are doing fine, for the most part. Luke is back to running around the house in his Superman costume whenever he's bored. He's had a few nightmares over the past week and asked to sleep with us twice, but we're making sure he feels safe. We don't mention my father around him, and he's still seeing his therapist. Meanwhile, our 14-month-old son learned 2 new words, hi and bye. Luke is trying to teach him how to say his own name. Jane's younger sister, who's away at college, is coming to visit for a few days to celebrate her 21st birthday. Luke is excited about her visit, and Jane is looking forward to finally having a drink with her. I don't blame her. We're hoping her presence lifts everyone's spirits. Things have been rough for both me and Jane. Normally, she tries to hide her emotions, but for a week after the incident, she cried herself to sleep almost every night. It breaks my heart to see her like that, and I can't shake the feeling that this is my fault. There's a part of me that says I couldn't have predicted that my stepmother was capable of this. But it doesn't change the fact that I allowed my father to be around the kids unsupervised, knowing that my stepmother would likely be with him. It's the worst guilt I've ever felt, and I don't think I'll ever forgive myself for it. Jane has been feeling better lately and is trying to convince me to see a therapist. I've never done that before, but now seems like the right time to give it a shot. This week, I was surprised by a few messages from people suggesting I forgive my father and stepmother and invite them back to the wedding. That's not happening. In fact, I'm never forgiving my stepmother at all. I will never be able to understand or forget what she did. As for the wedding, it's not our top priority right now, but we're not postponing it. We briefly considered changing the date, but the one we chose is the only one that works for our guests. Jane's family is larger and more closely knit, so they're naturally more involved in the preparations, but I still have relatives participating. My sister is one of the bridesmaids, 2 of my cousins are groomsmen, and my mom will walk in the main wedding procession. Going through all of this with Jane has made me realize just how deeply I love this woman. I couldn't ask for a better partner to build a family with, and I can't imagine what I would do without her. This ordeal didn't break us, and for that, I couldn't be more grateful. I wasn't planning on writing another update until after the wedding unless something significant happened. Well, something significant happened. Good news, we got the restraining order. Bad news, Jane and I had to see my stepmother and father in court. It was our first time seeing them since we kicked them out of our home over a month ago. We left the kids with Jane's brother and his wife, so Luke didn't have to see them. The hearing was much faster than I expected. I'll give my father credit for at least being smart enough to realize they had no chance of winning. The evidence against them was overwhelming. We had security footage, Luke's medical report, and photos of his injuries. On top of that, my sister compiled all the texts and emails my stepmother sent to her and other relatives after the incident. My stepmother hates talking on the phone, so there were a lot of messages. They didn't even bother hiring a lawyer. The judge granted the restraining order. My stepmother is now legally prohibited from coming within 150 meters of us or our home. This week, we're changing all the locks, and I'm considering switching my phone number. Honestly, the moment we left the courthouse, I felt safe for the first time since this nightmare started. Jane nearly burst into tears from relief as soon as we got in the car. We picked up the kids and went to McDonald's with Jane's brother and his family to celebrate. A few hours later, my father called me. The restraining order doesn't apply to him, so he can still contact me. Jane and the kids were already asleep, so I answered. I didn't expect him to suddenly apologize or change his mind, but I figured I'd give him one last chance. He tried to start the conversation with small talk, but I immediately told him to get to the point. His first question, "Did you really need to get that order?" I made it crystal clear. My stepmother will never go near Jane or my children again, and I'm glad we now have legal protection to make sure of that. Every excuse he tried to make for her, I shut down. She only hit him once. That's once too many. Kids need their grandmother. She's not their grandmother. You owe her respect. She hit a child in my home. I don't owe her a damn thing. Then he started a rant about family, about how my stepmother isn't a monster, and about everything she's supposedly done for me and my sister since she entered our lives. So I responded by listing every single instance I could remember where she had lied, overstepped, or acted inappropriately toward me or my sister. I reminded him how she always had to steal the spotlight during major family events, our wedding plans, the birth of our son, Jane's baby shower, my sister's college graduation, how obsessed she was with presenting an image of a perfect family while treating Luke like garbage. I even brought up the time she used to snoop through our stuff as kids. It might seem minor compared to everything else, but it went on for years, right up until my sister moved out 3 months ago. We're pretty sure that's how she found out about Jane's dress fitting, by reading my sister's journal when she wasn't home. Some of the things I reminded him of were long and complicated, but in the end, it solidified one thing for me. My stepmother means absolutely nothing to me. My father tried one last time to excuse her. She never felt accepted. I cut him off. I told him he had a choice, to protect his grandchildren or decide with his monstrous wife. And he made his decision. That's all I need to know. I hung up without saying goodbye. Later, my sister told me he called her, and she told him she was cutting contact too. I think we're both starting to accept that our father is never going to change. My father has made his priorities clear, and his children and grandchildren aren't part of them. Final update. My stepmother is permanently out of our lives. After more than 2 years of being engaged, Jane and I finally got married last Saturday. We're still getting used to calling each other husband and wife, but I'm sure we'll adjust soon. The wedding was incredible. Our families finally met. The kids had an amazing time, and we danced so much that I could barely stand the next day. Luke took his role as ring bearer very seriously, holding my son's hand as they walked down the aisle. Aside from my aunt getting so drunk that she had to be wheeled out in a wheelchair, which, to be fair, I fully expected, everything went perfectly. It's been 4 months since we got the restraining order against my stepmother, and things have been relatively peaceful. Of course, absolute peace is impossible, but you don't always get everything you want. I wasn't particularly worried about her showing up at the wedding, especially after getting the order. She's literally banned from coming near us, and we made it very clear that if she tried, we would call the police immediately. Still, my friends advised me to take extra security measures, so I did. She didn't show up, but I have no regrets. Any money spent on safety is money well spent. My stepbrother and I exchanged birthday messages, and he also texted Jane on her birthday in June. That's been our only contact in months. He knows the door is open if he ever wants to apologize. My father has stopped trying to reach out to me. We haven't spoken since April. He still tries to talk to my sister, but she ignores him. A few days after she cut contact, they had a massive fight over the phone about my stepmother's behavior over the years. Things got ugly. Insults were thrown, painful topics were brought up, and most importantly, my father sided with my stepmother on almost everything. Afterward, my sister called me in tears. I wanted to call my father and scream at him, but she asked me not to. She's okay now, she hasn't blocked him, but she also doesn't respond to his calls or messages. Since then, he's only messaged her 3 times. A half-hearted apology. A birthday message for me in May. A long-winded complaint after neither of us wished him a happy Father's Day because despite our differences, he's still our father. He's right. I love my father and always will. But I can't be around him anymore. I've closed that door, but I haven't locked it. He knows what he needs to do to get his family back. I don't think he ever will. But if there's even the tiniest chance, maybe I'd crack the door open. That's my wife's idea. I'm far less optimistic than she is, but maybe it's important to hold on to at least some hope. Jane hasn't forgiven my father or my stepmother either. She's always been fiercely protective of Luke, so it's no surprise that this entire nightmare shook her. A part of me was afraid she'd blame me, but when I suggested that, she called me an idiot. I've been seeing a therapist for a few months now, and it's helped more than I expected. I realized that my stepmother's behavior in my childhood was much worse than I had thought. And honestly, it just feels good to finally talk to someone about it. Right now, I am more than happy. I just married the most amazing woman, and I have the family I always dreamed of. We're not perfect, but I never knew life could be this good. Short update. My stepbrother called me this morning. Apparently, he had a fight with my stepmother and wants to meet. I agreed, but only on the condition that it's just the two of us. We plan to get coffee on Wednesday. I have no idea what to expect, but even if he apologizes, what matters to me is whether he understands why and how he let us down. Short update number 2. I postponed our meeting because Jane and I are leaving for our honeymoon on Friday. No matter how our conversation goes, I don't want to spend my entire trip thinking about it. He understood, and we'll meet when I get back. Final update on my stepbrother. We finally met for coffee in August. During his argument with my stepmother, the topic of the restraining order came up. She had lied to him about several details, blamed Luke for bullying my younger son, insulted Jane, and more. But this time, he pushed back and made her tell the truth. After talking with a therapist, his friends, and reflecting on how she raised him, he finally admitted that I hadn't exaggerated what she did to Luke. He had wanted to reach out to me since June, but didn't want to distract me and Jane before the wedding. For the past 4 months, we've been working on rebuilding our relationship. We've met for coffee and lunches, talking about his mother and how her actions affected our lives and my children's lives. In October, Jane started joining us. 2 weeks ago, the kids saw him again for the first time. At first, things were a little awkward, but now, everything feels normal. He's also reconnecting with my sister. In early November, he completely cut ties with my stepmother. Jane and the kids are doing great. Luke turned 5 in September, and our little one will be 2 in February. That's all for now. This story is finally over. But if anything changes, I'll let you know.